the world is not a place that's going to be favorable to you. We learned this in Genesis 3 when Adam and Eve are expelled to the garden, is that the earth is going to now be contrary to us and raise thorns in our presence, let's say. There's going to be these things that are a danger to us. And so there's a couple of things that parents can grant to their children. One of them is safety. Safety is something that should be a priority to parents for their children. However, inside the home, your child may be safe, but it doesn't only remain inside the home. Eventually, a successful parent will have a child who's ready to leave the home and confront the world forthrightly, and be somebody who's perhaps one of those leaders, somebody that's worthy of following. That doesn't happen by accident. And so the problem is that while you desire the safety of your children, and that's a noble goal, the world is not safe, and you can't make it safe. So you can't, because you can't make your children indefinitely safe, what you should do instead is make them strong. And that's something that takes a deep deal of discernment to know their emotional character and their own maturity, to see what things that they can confront and allow them the space to be exposed to some things so that they can willfully confront them, because the world is going to shove it in their face one way or another. And there's a different way about, like, even psychologically, neurologically, you go about confronting things differently when it's forced upon you versus when you willfully confront it. You don't even use the same neural pathways to confront a phobia if it's just thrown at you versus if you decide to willfully confront it. Confrontation, when it's willful, can not show you, it's not that it's showing you that life isn't scary. It's showing you that you're bigger than the thing you're afraid of. And that's ultimately one of the reasons why you have stories that have things like dragons and death and monsters in a swamp, or the barbarian on the outside of the wall, this imminent threat. The reason why it's there is not just to make us paranoid and have this tribalism of us versus them. That's not the intent initially of having stories that are like that. Ultimately, what it's showing you is that the outside is a dangerous place, but you need the things that are out there. That's why the dragon is hoarding gold or guarding a maiden. Those are the things that you're going to need as a young hero. Those are the things that are going to be your motive force for pursuing the good that's out there, and not simply being remained locked up inside the city walls, afraid in the basement, right? The last thing that we need is another repeated generation of 30 to 35-year-old guys who are stuck in their parents' basement because they were never told, you have an adventure to go deal with. You need to get out. You need to go. You need to confront reality with everything in you. The world is missing the piece that you have for it. And it's because you've lacked that initiative to go out. And it's because of safety a lot of the time. It's because of safety. We're more afraid of failing than we are of trying. And that's a mistake. And so we shouldn't train our children to be afraid. We should train them to be strong. And oftentimes that means the kind of exposure that you wouldn't want for them. You have to allow them to fail a couple of times. You have to allow them the right level of, if I can be so crude, the right level of exposure to a kind of trauma that's going to build in them the resilience of character. You don't learn resilience by sitting around eating cake and having a good time of it. That's not how you become the kind of hard as nails character, right? That is, in some sense, what you would want for a baby or an infant or even a small child. But once they get to a certain point, you want to be able to shove them out and say, you know what, go and try. Go and try. Yeah, it's going to hurt. Yeah, it's going to be hard. It's going to suck sometimes because you're going to feel like you're not good at things. But you know what? If you're not willing to not be good at something, you'll never practice. And if you never practice, you'll never be good at it. So stop being afraid. Just go and try. That's why we say things like do your best, right? What we mean is you have the potential to do something remarkable. And if you don't ever try, you're never going to fail, but you're also never going to succeed. Which one would you pick? Success, right? If you're going to pick success, you have to be willing to fail at least sometimes, and it's kind of the gamble of that discernment process of learning, the give and take of wanting your child to be safe, but also recognizing that they need to be strengthened. They need to face things. You don't learn endurance in a bubble. You learn it when you're out there getting hurt and doing things that are difficult. That's when you learn those things. And so there are things that in let's say in modern storytelling, even in the secular world, that these kids are going to be confronted with in school with their peers. They're going to hear that kind of language. They're going to hear that kind of humor. They're going to hear those words. They're going to hear that kind of thing. They're going to hear the gossip. They're going to it's going to confront them one way or the other. And you might as well let them know, hey, this is why we don't participate in this. Do you see what it does? And you can have those cautionary tales of when things go terribly wrong. Scripture is replete with examples of people who did it wrong, as much as it is of examples of people who did it right. And the reason why Scripture has a balance of those two things is because that's exactly what reality is made of. It's not made of perfectly saintly characters, but it's also not just made of villains and cowards. It's made of brave people who confront darkness on purpose. And so it is a fine line to be met, but I think it's a mistake to go to the extreme of trying to keep your children safe to the neglect of making them strong.